My worst nightmare. As a child, I despised attending any ceremony, particularly weddings. Every time I went, all I witnessed was chaos and disorder, and it always left me feeling drained and frustrated. I was introduced to the world of weddings at the age of 9 when I attended my uncle's ceremony. The joyous atmosphere was dampened by a woman who had too much to drink and threw up beside me, leaving me feeling unwell. The next wedding I attended was for some distant relative when I was 13. It was a chaotic affair, with unruly children running around, smearing wedding cake and food all over each other. As a teenager, I attended my third wedding at the age of 16. However, the occasion did not go as planned, as the groom arrived extremely late, causing the wedding to be canceled. This unfortunate turn of events sparked an intense fight between the two families, resulting in a chaotic and unpleasant experience for everyone involved. Eventually, I stopped attending them altogether. However, I couldn't avoid going to my best friend and distant cousin Juliana's wedding, which took place 2 days ago. It was the day of her wedding, and for some inexplicable reason, she chose to call me at the crack of dawn. 3 things I despise the most: weddings, my food getting stolen, and someone disturbing my peaceful slumber. I love sleep, so I dismissed the call at least 5 times. However, when she persisted, I answered the phone in a daze. "What do you want?" I grumbled, still half asleep. "Danny, you need to be at home in 10 minutes, she said, before abruptly hanging up the phone. I put the phone down and tried to go back to sleep without giving her request a second thought. But 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. "What do you want now?" I screamed, feeling increasingly frustrated. "Stop sleeping and hurry up and get here," she roared. I got up, exasperated, and began rubbing my eyes while yawning. The only thing on my mind was sleep, and I couldn't help but wonder why people bother getting married. Even though it was her special day, it felt like I was being punished. After deciding to head to her house, I went to the bathroom to freshen up. I took my time, deliberately savoring the feeling of the warm water running over my skin as I cleaned up and got ready. Once I was done, I finally set out for her place. Despite her repeated phone calls, I chose not to answer as I drove, relishing the small act of defiance. She was likely wondering if I had fallen asleep again, but I didn't care. As soon as my car pulled up, I saw her dart out of the front door of her house. Before I could even step out of the vehicle, she hastily approached me and thrust a small box into my hands, urging me to deliver it to her fiancé. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of annoyance as I asked her if that was the only reason she had called me over. She responded in the affirmative, explaining that her fiancé needed to wear the box's contents with his suit. With a dismissive wave, she instructed me to hurry up and get going. I shot her a frustrated glance before starting the engine and driving towards her fiancé's house. I picked up the phone with a deep sigh and saw her name flashing on my screen again, my patience already thinning. "What is it now?" I asked Juliana, my annoyance turning into anger as I struggled to keep composure. "His passcode is 9780. He must be sleeping, so just put it beside his bed and you're free to leave," she said briskly, business-likely. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of irritation at her dismissive tone. "Are you sure you don't want me to give him a nice bath and dress him up too?" I said, the sarcasm dripping from my voice. "Shut up and do as I said," she snapped, her impatience palpable, before abruptly ending the call. I was left standing there feeling frustrated and resentful, wondering why I had agreed to help Juliana in the first place. After traveling for around 20 minutes, I finally arrived at Paul's house, Upon entering, I was surprised to find the place in disarray, indicating that they had partied hard the previous night. Knowing the way to his bedroom, I made my way there, but I heard strange and unsettling moaning sounds emanating from the room as I approached. Despite my growing apprehension, I pushed forward and peered inside, only to be met with a shocking and unexpected sight. The bastard was cheating on Juliana, and my first instinct was to capture the moment on camera. I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal towards him, and I knew that Juliana deserved to see the truth before it was too late. So I quickly sent her the photo before entering the room. "What do we have here such early in the morning?" As their eyes landed on me after hearing my voice, they immediately tried to hide themselves under the sheet. Dan, it's nothing. She is just a stripper." Paul started stuttering when I caught them and tried to explain how it happened. He even said he was drunk, which was only making me laugh. Drunk people don't have sex first thing in the morning on their wedding day. My phone began ringing once again, and a broad smile spread across my face as I saw my cousin's name on the screen. I showed it to him before answering the call. "What's the meaning of this photo, Dan?" her angry voice demanded. "There is no meaning behind it, Julie. I'm standing at the scene right now." As I told her that, Paul's cheater face turned pale as he realized his wedding was about to be called off. "Hold them right there and don't let them escape," she commanded, before disconnecting the call. I accepted her order and stood at the door, preventing their exit. He tried to make multiple excuses, saying it wasn't his fault and that the stripper seduced him. Then he resorted to begging, followed by threats as he attempted to escape. But I am not a judo trainer for nothing. About half an hour later, Juliana entered with the entire family. She probably would have called his parents too, because they entered shortly after, and they all saw what shameful act he had committed, before humiliating him as she threw the ring on his face while calling off the wedding. My work there was done, so I headed home for my sleep, leaving them to their drama. I think she knew he was cheating. That must be why she called me so early in the morning. I don't know what the reason was. One thing is for sure, it doesn't matter if it's my sister or brother. I am never attending another wedding again.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Desperation. What else am I supposed to do? I'm still short on money, I yelled as I checked my balance and realized I was nowhere near buying the latest model iPhone. A month after the model was released, everyone in my friend circle had already bought it except for me. I thought it wasn't a big deal and I would be able to buy it as well. But unfortunately, my parents refused to pay for it, and since I was of age to move out, they asked me to. I still thought I could, by saving some money, so I got a part-time job. But turned out, the living cost was too much. I was unable to save the target amount. 3 months later, I was still not able to save enough. I took other part-time jobs as well and started working even harder, but to no avail. 6 months passed and I was only able to save 1/4 amount of the iPhone's cost. One day when I was passing by a dark-looking alley, I saw a poster. It said that they gave money for fighting. It was some sort of game where two players fight each other, and they just simply pay you money to participate in the fight. The amount written on the poster was quite good, and I knew if I wanted to buy that iPhone, I had no other choice but to get involved in this. I pulled the poster off the wall and folded it before shoving it into my pocket. Since I was on my way back to a cargo loading job, I went there. By the time my shift ended, I was too hungry, so I went to the taco truck that was across the road from the place where I was working and bought 2 tacos. While I was eating, I thought about giving a call on the number written on the poster. I took the poster out and dialed it. When no one answered it the 2 times I called, I thought maybe it was some fake ad poster. So I threw the poster in the nearest dumpster, and with a disappointed mind, I returned home. I checked my bank balance one more time, and it was still just as disappointing as it was last time. I walked over to the kitchen to grab some water, and the moment I opened the refrigerator, I realized I was running out of groceries, and I needed to spend some more money to buy that. I slammed the refrigerator door shut in frustration before heading to my bedroom and slumping into my bed. Just as I was about to fall asleep, my phone started ringing. I reached out to the bedside table where I had put it before. As I glanced at the phone, I saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. Initially, I would have just rejected any call from an unknown number, but for some reason, I accepted it. On the other end of the line was a man who introduced himself as a coordinator from the fighting games. He told me that if I wanted to participate, I needed to come by the address he would give me, and I had to do it that very evening since the fights would start later that night. I wrote down the address he gave me before I got dressed up and headed there. The address was quite complicated. I had to walk deep into some sketchy-looking alley, and the area itself was quite secluded. It suddenly started to get creepier when 2 bald dudes with skull tattoos on their scalp started walking toward me from the end of the alley the moment they saw me. I freaked out and started backing away, but before I could turn, one of them called out and asked if I was there for the fighting game. I stopped and nodded my head yes. One of them asked me to follow him while the other stood there, probably waiting for another player. I was escorted to what looked like an abandoned warehouse, and as I entered, I was shocked to see there was a crowd. There was a ring there where 2 people were fighting while people were there to watch the fight and were even betting on them. I was led to a secret room where a guy came up to me and told me that if the public betted on me more than I had to lose the game, but if they bet on my opponent, I had to win the game, no matter what, or else I wouldn't get the money. I felt pressured, but I had to do it. My opponent had a similar physique to mine, so I thought maybe it would be good. I looked a bit fitter than him, so people betted on me more. I had to lose the game, but for some reason, I didn't want to. To my surprise, my opponent started thrashing me like I was a punching bag, and only then I realized he was someone who enjoyed hurting others because while hitting me, he was smiling like a maniac. I realized even if I aimed to win against this dude, I would still have lost the fight. He thrashed me. Even when the game ended, he continued beating the shit out of me. My vision had blurred, my face was bleeding from different regions, and I could barely feel my limbs. Though I was able to get the prize money, half of it was used for hospital bills. I've never regretted anything in my life other than participating in that fight. They did call me again to ask if I wanted to participate again, but I declined. It's been 4 months since then, and the next iPhone model is about to launch soon. But I still haven't been able to make the amount needed for the previous one, and now my friends were all talking about buying the new model. I realized I was not the same anymore. No matter what I do, I would never be able to buy new phones every year just to look cool. Instead, I decided to work hard without wasting my money or energy on such things until the day I finally would be able to afford the luxury of having such phones.
I was a bad kid. And now I'm not talking about your regular teenage delinquency, like trying cigarettes, school detention, or getting bad grades. I mean really bad. The age 17, I was shoplifting, stealing cars, getting picked up by cops for all sorts of things. Not exactly hurting anyone, but I was a constant headache for my mom and dad. Then after me and dad almost got into an actual fist fight, he kicked me out of the house. I knew I deserved it, and I knew they figured I'd just go stay with friends for a couple of days, because that's exactly what I did. But me being me, I quickly wore out my welcome in my buddies' houses and ran out of places to stay. But again, me being me, I was way too proud to just go home and apologize. Since it was summertime, I figured it'd be a good idea to head down to the park to find somewhere to sleep. Now I lived in the inner city back then, so there was a bunch of other actual homeless people already sleeping there. And as soon as I realized I was actually stuck out there for a night, I started to realize that this homeless thing wasn't a game anymore. As it started to get really late, I got to the park at around 11 p.m., and it was like 1 a.m. by the time this happened. One of the homeless dudes walked up to me as I started to bed down on the bench and started talking to me. He asked what I was doing, and being naive, I told him homelessness, immediately responding by saying, "No, you're not," and pretty much guessed the whole deal about me having a falling out with my mom and dad. I didn't want to admit that he was exactly right, so I just kept my mouth shut. But I remember him saying something like, "Really though, kid, if you have Ken, you need to pay him a visit because I promise you ain't ready for this life." My pride kept me out there for 3 whole nights, and every single time I caught up on that bench, the same old homeless dude would walk up and be like, "Go home, the sing you." In hindsight, he was exactly right. But at the time, he was just another person to prove wrong. My final night on the street, I also happened to be the first that I tried to integrate myself with the homeless folk who slept in the park, partially out of boredom and partially out of hunger. I'd run out of money, run out of food, and I figured if I hung out with the other guys, I could maybe get in on some of their food or something. I asked around, but no one had any spares until I asked this one guy, and he told me to buzz off, and I noticed a Snickers bar sticking out of his coat pocket. My rumbling stomach basically just overrode my brain, and with all the dexterity of a Victorian pickpocket, I slid the thing out of his pocket and walked off. Now my proudest moment stealing food from a homeless guy, when I could have just swallowed my pride and walk home, but it is what it is. So I go off to hide somewhere so I can devour the Snickers hold, and I walk back to where the other guys are to hang out some more. Maybe like 2 or 3 hours later, I'm still trying to integrate myself with the homeless guys, but I'm also still pretty nervous about them for obvious reasons. I figured the guy I stole from is too drunk to even notice that I stole from him. But oh boy, was I wrong about that. Because like I said, a few hours after I stole it, I noticed the guy began to tap his coat pocket, obviously noticing that the candy bar is gone. I'm trying to remain inconspicuous, but I'm also trying to keep my eye on the guy, because if he put 2 and 2 together and worked out that it was me that stole from him, I wanted enough warning to be able to get out of there. So the guy taps his pocket when he stops. I can see the cogs turning in his booze-soaked brain, as I figured he was thinking pretty sure I had some candy in there. But then a few seconds later, he's back taking pulls from his 40 ancillary, had completely forgotten about the whole thing. Only he hadn't. And the most shocking thing about what came next was how he went from 0 to 100 in like a second flat. So remember that pool of his 40. He takes 1, then 2, then a third much larger one, almost like he was trying to polish the whole thing off in a hurry. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what he was doing, because what was once an innocent beverage receptacle soon became a weapon. When he turned to the guy to his right and sent the glass 40 bottles smashing into his face, the guy just collapsed, hands covering his face, some hands with muffled blood, blood-curdling screams that he let out, and the guy I stole from then started kicking the lie. If I let him steal from me, mother effer. And then, of all the homeless people there, only one actually tried to break it up. And even then, it was just a slurred by breaking up over there, which ended up being totally ignored. I remember turning to the older dude had been nice to me, telling me to go home and whatnot, and I feigned ignorance. As I asked him what was going on, the guy said the dude getting beat down was always stealing stuff, so if anything went missing around the park, it was most probably his fault. No one cared though. No one gave single worry that this guy was getting his face stomped on, and it was all my fault. Oh, and I mean stomped on. I could hear this guy's face literally crunching under this guy's boot. I know I should have said something. I know I should have owned up. But believe me when I tell you that I've never been that scared. Not before or after. All I could think of was, if I tell the truth, that'd be my face getting stomped on. Only he'll probably be like 100 times worse because, well, look what I cost. I turned to the nice guy and was like, what if he didn't steal it? What if someone else stole it? And the guy looked at me and his eyes went all wide and he leaned in and said, don't say a word, kid. Just leave. Leave and never ever come back. As I walked away, I could still hear the guy getting his buck beaten, although I never found out what happened to him. I don't see anyone being able to survive the kind of head injuries he got. A very same night, maybe at around 2 a.m., I walked back to my parents' house and banged on the front door until my dad woke up and answered. I just blurted out this big long apology about being a total idiot to not appreciate what I'd had. I'm pleased to say that now is the first step on the road of being a decent human being, because almost everything I did before that had little to no consequences, or rather, will little their word and bother me. But that night I sold the candy bar, I actually saw how bad the repercussions could be. And honestly, I had no idea that could ever be that bad. Just for taking a candy bar. I feel equal parts shame and horror when I look back on it. My pride and greed caused me to do something shameful, and my cowardice might have cost him a relatively innocent man's life. I wish it had never happened, but at the same time, if it didn't, who knows? I might be still hanging out in that park today, if I'd even been alive at all. My father was a pastor at the local church in Wales. Being a pastor, he had so many responsibilities, but he was alone, and his first wife left him early when he couldn't just give them the time he wanted to, and it was very difficult in the beginning to deal with it. But as the time went by, we got more and more separated from everything. He was getting alone, and then he decided to not be that anymore. And he wanted to get married again, but to find a girl of the appropriate age for him was a task. But just in time, there was a person, a stranger that moved into town a month ago and was very frequent to the Sunday sermons. Her name was Helen. I knew Helen from the first day that she moved in the town. She said she was a nomad and she barely stopped at a place. I met her in the local salon where she was working, and I told her about my father being the sermon and being one of the most respectable members in the society, and she was pretty impressed by it. We were quick to be friends after that. We would hang out together a lot, and that was when I told her everything about my family, and she was very keen on knowing all about us. Our relationship was a bit different, and people just wouldn't understand it, so we never disclosed it. She and I got very close, but then I stopped seeing her because that was the only appropriate thing to do. And then I found out that my father sent the marriage proposal to the woman, and weirdly that the woman accepted it, knowing the things between us. So I decided not to overthink it and roll with whatever was happening. They met, and things were decided between them, and the council worked out things where they decided the event of all the things, and he was to wed the woman in the same church. I was very skeptic of the woman, mostly because in all the days that I knew her, there was something about her that was distinct from the others, almost as if she did not know about her existence. She claimed to be a nomad, but all the places she talked about mostly sounded like Latin, and the places she talked about rarely existed. Just days before the wedding, she hesitated and asked my father if they can get married outside the church in the garden. She did not want to do that indoors, and something about being closer to God is to be with trees and rather the stones. I guess things like these really infatuated my father about her. One morning, while I was sitting and trying to arrange the flowers, she came towards me and said, "I might going to be your new stepmother, but let us not forget that we are friends first and then everything else." I agreed and smiled. I guess we both had mutual respect and trust between us, and that is the reason we'll synced well. And while my father was pretty happy that it wasn't an issue for me. The wedding happened, and it was a great event, and everyone was pretty excited and happy. And then around a month later, there were the bitter bickering between both of them that started, and I used to stay as far away as I can from their matter. She was getting weirder every day, and that was blacker than she was wearing, and would deny any sermon, saying that she is tired of hearing my father talk about God. We were just sitting having our evening tea when she told me, "He isn't that great, you know, the God." And I wondered what she was on about. And then she said to me, "I'm going to share a secret with you. When I said I am a nomad, I meant in the realms. I roam from the realm of the living to the realm of the dead to the realm of the nothingness. And when I curse someone and kill them, they don't go to the realm of the dead. They go to the realm of nothingness. I am trying to build that realm, and I am going to be the queen, and you are going to be the king. When in the full moon I drench out the blood of your father, I shall marry you, and we shall drink the blood of your father to unionize, and then we cross over this realm and rule it together." I looked at her in worry and said, "Are you all right?" She was adamant on making me believe her, and I told her, "You don't want to visit the loony bin, do you?" She looked at me, grinding her teeth, and said, "Let me show you. I will stab myself and prove you that I am the nomad between the realms." And as she reached for the knife, I held her hand, stopped her, and said, "It's okay, I believe you." And then later, she smiled, almost as if I had agreed with everything she had said. So I decided to tell my father everything, and told him that we should get her to a doctor of the mind to get her checked out. I decided to take her, and then there must have been a full noon night when I decided to take her with me, and I told her that we can start the sermon she wanted to and first buy some things. My father was right there. Her hairs were all covering her face, and she was wearing everything black, and she started talking gibberish. And that is when she started charging my father with a knife, and then to take her down, just swished a punch that threw her off guard. I had to. I wasn't very proud of that, but I had to. She was unconscious, and then we took her to the mind doctor, where he diagnosed her with personality disorder and said that it is better she stays there because the switches can be unpredictable and it can be dangerous for her. 3 days after we dropped her there, they told us that she killed herself by asphyxiating herself, and I wondered how she could have done that. I went there to get the body, and they said that it disappeared. I did not believe in them and wondered if foul play. I went back to tell my dad, who was broken by the news, only to find out that my dad was lying dead in his own pool of blood, and she was standing over the body, her black robe flaring in air, and she extended her hand and said, "Come, my king."